Okay, so welcome everyone to another session of the Virtual Kant Congress. Today we are very pleased to receive the Japanese Kant Society, who will be curating this session. And many thanks to Professor Toshiro Terada, who put together the session and will be chairing it today for us. Toshiro is a professor of philosophy at Sophia University in Tokyo. And many thanks for all of you. Please, if you could, switch your videos, it would be great so we can emulate this feeling of being in the same room, but only if possible. And after the session, we will leave the Zoom meeting open for informal conversations. So all of you are very welcome to stay. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Professor Terada. Many thanks, and we are looking forward to the session.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Garcia. Thank you for the nice introduction. And I'm Toshiro Terada, the panel chair for today. As Garcia-san told you, I teach at the Sophia University in Tokyo, and I am a member of Japanese Kant Society. I am very pleased to introduce two young members of our society as today's speakers, Airi Nakano and Ryosuke Igarashi. Well, please excuse me calling people in a Japanese way with the suffix san, like Nakano-san and Igarashi-san. Well, let me introduce today's speakers. Airi Nakano-san is a lecturer at Waseda University, and she has published the article, The Distribution Problem in Kant's Doctrine of Highest Good, just to name one. Yusuke Igarashi-san is an associate professor at the Kyoto University, and he has published the article, How Judgments Relate to Objects, Kant's Singular Judgment and its Semantics, just to name one. Each speaker is supposed to speak for about 40 minutes, followed by a 20-minute discussion. We will try not to exceed 2 hours. I beg your cooperation. So, Airi Nakano-san, please. The title of the talk is Kant's Radical Evil and the Idea of Ethical Commonwealth.
Thank you for the introduction, Professor Terada. So quickly, I share my slide. Is it okay? Everyone can see my slides. Okay. Then I will start. Hello, my name is Airi Nakano from Waseda University, Tokyo. It is a great honor to be able to speak today. Before I start, I would like to thank the organizer of the Virtual Kant Congress with a cosmopolitan purpose for inviting me to speak today. Today, I'd like to talk about the role of the idea of God in the moral community. I have changed the title, but the content I had planned is almost the same. And the main thesis I'd like to present is that Kant's conception of moral community involves an aspect of agents on moral progress to their moral perfection, which drives them to assume the idea of God as a judge. Recent studies have shown that Kant's moral theory includes communal aspects fundamentally. Kate Moran emphasizes that Kant's moral theory is fundamentally communal rather than individual. First, Kant's moral philosophy actually urges us to strive towards a kind of ethical community. Second, the means through which we can best achieve this end are also social. Participation in social institutions and relationships such as education, friendship, and civic life help us to develop our moral capacities and thus further progress towards the ideal ethical community. These social institutions that facilitate our progress toward this end become central to a complete account of Kant's moral philosophy, end quote. And Aaron Wood states that human propensity to evil arises in the social condition, also quote, the origin of evil is social, so the struggle against evil can be effective only if it assumes a social form. Though these interpreters emphasize the social and communal character of Kant's moral theory, the text contains several concepts of a moral or ethical community. Firstly, in critical purism, Kant presents the moral world, regnum gratiae, as the purposive unity of all things, constructed to the natural world. Secondly, the same unity of purposes is called the kingdom of ends in the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals. It is presented in the third formula of the categorical imperative as the whole of all ends in systematic connection. There is a whole both of rational beings as ends in themselves and of ends of his own that each may set himself. Thirdly, in almost the entire part of critical practicalism, Kant argues the highest good, which consists of agents, virtue or holiness and happiness proportionate to the virtue. Fourthly, religion within the boundary of mere reason deals with the conception of moral community in three ways. First, the ethical commonwealth, church, and the kingdom of God. Among them, the highest good has been discussed as the moral community. Also, the ethical community is seen a matured concept of Kant's moral community. Here, we have some interpretations on highest good. First, Paul Guyer states why in the first and second critiques, Kant constructed the idea of highest good only intelligibly. In the 1790s, he developed it into an earthly conception, which can be realized in the sensible world by the human species. Also, Thomas Pogge thinks that Kant changes the religious conception into a worldly conception. And there is a tendency to reduce the divine aspect to more secular conceptions. John Silver distinguishes immanent from transcendent conception, and Andrews Rees divides the highest good into two conceptions, theological and secular conceptions. And he shows the latter as the best interpretation. Thus, there are wide agreement on the highest good developing from an abstract conception into a more secular one, or as time goes by. But is the highest good just a community of human agents? It is textually clear that Kant thinks of the highest good as both personal and communal. In the second critique, Kant thinks of the highest good as the best state of affairs of a person. He mentioned the highest good in the world as the derived highest good. For any variant of the moral community, Kant considers it not only a community of virtuous human agents, but also having God as its sovereign. Why and what content does it have? In this presentation, I will examine the concept of Kant's moral community from a perspective of agents' personal progress to their moral perfection. I am going to divide my presentation into 5 parts. First, we will see interpretations of highest good. Second, we will have the idea of God as a core part of Kant's moral community. Then we will turn to why and for what is the idea of God needed. After that, we will see a thread of divine omniscience and a theological model. Finally, we will get to the conclusion. I would like to start by talking about interpretations of the highest good. In this section, I would like to illustrate the tendency of recent interpretations on the highest good. First, let us see John Silver's interpretation. He divides the highest good into 2 conceptions, transcendent and immanent. Quote, the idea of the highest good as transcendent, there is the idea of highest good as object, which man is obligated to attain in full, is the measure that man uses in assessing the limits of his capacity. This is only norm which can assure him that he does not sell himself and his freedom short, that he does not become insensitive to his capacities and hence to what may be his duties. But the idea of the highest good as immanent, there is the idea of the highest good as an object, which man is obligated to promote to the full extent of his powers, is a measure which specifies man's actual moral obligation. The idea of highest good, both as immanent and transcendent, expresses in greater concreteness the objectives of the principle, do the most perfect thing that can be done by you, and refrain from that whereby the greatest perfection possible through you is hindered. As immanent, the highest good defines the limits of man's moral responsibility within the limits of man's actual capacity. While Kant insists on representing the highest good as transcendent in its employment as ideal measure for human striving, he also insists on representing it as immanent in its employment as a measure of moral accountability. Thus, he divided the highest good into transcendent conception and immanent conception. The former is the ideal for human moral striving to attain the highest good. The latter reflects the human actual capacity to promote the highest good. In addition, we have Andrew Reese's influential reading. He seems partly to inherit Silver's distinction, the secular and theological conception. Quote, by theological interpretations of the highest good, we may understand the following. Any reasonably complete description of this state of affairs must bring in some theological notion, for instance, the existence or activity of God, or such concepts as that of afterlife or another world. One must appeal to some such notions as soon as one asks for any details about the nature of this state of affairs, for example, about the ends that individuals would enjoy or the circumstances under which they are fulfilled. For our purposes, the important feature of the theological conception of the highest good is that it would be a state of affairs that comes about in another world through the activity of God. By contrast, a secular conception of the highest good can be described entirely in naturalistic terms as a state of affairs to be achieved in this world through human activity. Kant saw that ultimately we cannot fully understand how even the secular version of the highest good would be possible without the postulate of a moral author of the world, who orders the role of history in a certain way. Even so, a reasonably complete description of this state of affairs can be given in naturalistic terms. We can say how it would come about and what it would involve by referring exclusively to human conduct and ends. It is a secular conception in that a complete description does not require any agency or mechanism beyond the order of nature as we know it. End the quote. Thus, Rees rather focuses attention on the power of human agency than Silver, and attempts to paraphrase Kant's theological term in secular words. Through paraphrasing the theological term in secular ones, some could raise an objection. It is called the shrunken God objection, introduced by Alexander T. Ankrat and Andrew Chignell, who argue against this objection. For there are questions about the nature of deity required to bring about the highest good. Why is a full-blown infinite supreme deity required in order to make the highest good realizable? Why isn't the rest of God's or shrunken deity, or a karmic rule, or fifth living moral order, just as good for these purposes? Thus, according to this objection, a rest deity or committee of such or living moral order could do the job that Kant wants God to do. Then let me summarize this section. Jacqueline Marinier defends the transcendent conception of the highest good, as in this quotation. Again, quote, when the highest good is sold as immanent, it is a synthetic concept composed of birth and empirical happiness. However, the highest good in its transcendent aspect is such that both its components must transcend the world of sense. A considered view becomes mature views of the subject view on the subject will show that we cannot really make sense of the highest good as immanent without referring to its transcendent sense. The highest good in the world has meaning only insofar as it refers to its ultimate telos, itself standing outside the world of sense. This implies that the highest good as transcendent is its principal and more important sense. And I agree with her account. There have been explicit tendencies, first, to consider the highest good only as having an immanent or secular conception. Second, to reduce divine elements into the terms pertaining to human agency. In the former section, interpreters, however, seems to presuppose that highest good is just a community of human agents. But is this a proper understanding? According to Kant's text, though, there are two features. I'd like to present following two subtheses. First, subthesis 1 is that Kant consistently thinks that in any moral community, the idea of God plays a role as a sovereign. Second, subthesis 2 is that the highest good has not only an aspect of community, but also an aspect of persons in perfect harmony between virtue and happiness. Let me begin with the first subthesis. Kant consistently thinks that in any moral community, the idea of God plays a role as a sovereign. In the next few slides, I will be showing you some texts from Kant's works. Famously enough, in the dialectic chapter of the second critique, after solving the antinomy of the practical reason, Kant postulates God as an idea in order for the possibility of the highest good. Quote, therefore, the highest good in the world is possible only insofar as the supreme cause of nature, having causality in keeping with the moral disposition, is assumed. Now, a being capable of action in accordance with the representation of laws is an intelligent, a rational being, and hence, and the causality of such being in accordance with this representation of laws is his will. Therefore, the supreme cause of nature, insofar as it must be presupposed for the highest good, is a being that is the cause of nature by understanding and will, hence its author, that is God. Consequently, the postulate of the possibility of the highest derived good, the first word is likewise a postulate of the reality of the highest original good, namely of the existence of God. Now it was a duty for us to promote the highest good, hence there is in us not merely the want, but also the necessity as a need connected with duty to presuppose the possibility of this highest good, which, since it is possible only under the condition of the existence of God, connects the presupposition of the existence of God inseparably with duty. That is, it is morally necessary to assume the existence of God. End the quote. Next is Randberg. Kant shows the concept of kingdom consists of rational beings under the role, quote, for all rational beings stand under the role that each of them is to treat himself and all others never merely as means, but always at the same time as ending themselves. But from this, there arises a systematic union of rational beings through common objective roles, that is a kingdom, which can be called a kingdom of ends, admittedly only an idea. Because what these roles have as their purpose is just a relation of these beings to one another as end and means. End quote. Soon afterward, Kant states that ordinary rational beings, namely human agents, are only members of the kingdom. In addition to this, a sovereign is needed. Again, the quote, a rational being belongs a member to the kingdom of ends when he gives universal roles in it, but also himself subject to this role. He belongs to it as sovereign when, as law-giving, he is not subject to the will of any other. A rational being must always regard himself as law-giving in a kingdom of ends, possible through freedom of the will, whether as a member or as sovereign. He cannot, however, hold the position of sovereign merely by the maxim of his will, but only in case he is a completely independent being without needs and with unlimited resources adequate to his will. In this text, Kant avoids expressing the word God, but it seems obvious that the last sentence indicates God implicitly without needs and with unlimited resources. Lastly, we have a rather long text of revision. Again, let us confirm that Kant thinks an ethical community with the idea of God as a sovereign. Quote, if an ethical community is to come into being, all individuals must be subjected to public registration, and all the laws binding them must be capable of being regarded as commands of a common lawgiver. Now, if community to be founded to be a juridical one, the mass of people joining in a union must itself be the lawgiver of constitutional laws, because registration proceeds from the principle of limiting the freedom of each to the conditions under which it can coexist with the freedom of everyone else, in conformity with the universal law, and the universal will thus establishes an external legal constraint. If, however, the community is to be an ethical one, the people cannot itself be regarded as legislator. In such a community, all the laws are exclusively designed to promote the morality of the action, which is something internal and hence cannot be subject to public human laws, whereas the public laws, and in this they constitute a juridical community, are on the contrary directed to the legality of the action, which is visible to the eye and not to inner morality, which alone is at issue here. There must therefore be someone other than the people whom we can declare as a public lawgiver of an ethical community, but neither can ethical laws be thought of as proceeding originally merely from the will of this superior, as statutes that would not be binding without his prior sanction, for then they would not be ethical laws, and duty commensurate to them would not be a free virtue, but an externally enforceable legal duty. Therefore, only such a one can be thought of as the supreme lawgiver of an ethical community, with respect to whom all true duties, hence also the ethical duties, must be represented as at the same time his commands. Consequently, he must also be one who knows the heart in order to penetrate to the most intimate part of the disposition of each and everyone, and, as must be in every community, give to each according to worth of his action. But this is a concept of God as a moral ruler of the world. Hence, an ethical community is conceivable only as a people under divine commands, namely as a people of God, and indeed in accordance with the law of virtue. End the quote. And thus, every moral community accounts for the idea of God as sovereign, though it could be understood just an executive power. The idea involves threefold political powers united. Fourth, now in accordance with this need of practical reason, the universal two religious faiths face in God, first as the almighty creator of heaven and earth, namely morally as holy lawgiver. Second, as the preserver of human race, as his benevolent ruler and moral guardian. Third, as the administrator of his own holy laws, namely as just judge. This phrase really contains no mystery, since it expresses solely God's moral bearing toward the human race. It is also by nature available to all human reason, and is therefore to be met with in the region of most civilized peoples. It is also inherent in the concept of a people regarded as a community, where such threefold superior power, pouvoir, is always to be sought, except that the people is here represented as ethical, and hence the threefold quality of the moral head of the human race within the juridical civil state must of necessity be distributed among three different subjects, can be thought as united in one and the same being. Now we will see another aspect. Subthesis 2, the highest good, has not only an aspect of community, but also an aspect of person's inner perfect harmony between virtue and happiness. In the next few slides again, I will be showing you some text from Kant's works. First, let me show the personal aspects of highest good. In the second critique, the highest good is thought of not only as the highest good of possible world, but also highest good in the person. Fourth, Now, inasmuch as virtue and happiness together constitute the possession of the highest good in the person, and the happiness distributed in exact proportion to morality as worth of a person and his worthiness to be happy, constitutes the highest good of a possible world, end quote. That Kant argument, the second critic mainly focuses on the agent's inner proportion between virtue and happiness. This is not held only an airy conception of the highest good. Kant maintains this interest even in religion. In the preface, he asks the famous question and answers it. Again, quote, so morality really has no need of an end for right conduct. On the contrary, the law that contains the formal condition of the use of freedom in general suffices to it. Yet, an end proceeds from morality just the same, for it cannot possibly be a matter of indifference to reason. How to answer the question, what is then the result of this right conduct of ours? Nor to what we are to direct our doing or non-doing, even granted this is not free in our control, at least as something with which they are to harmonize. And this is indeed only the idea of an object that unites within itself the formal condition of all such ends as we ought to have, namely duty, with everything, which is conditional upon ends we have, and which conforms to duty, happiness proportioned to its observance, that is the idea of the highest good in the world, for whose possibility we must assume a higher, more holy, and most holy and omnipotent being who alone can unite the two elements of this good. Thus Kant indicates the answer, the highest good in the world, but in Book 2 of Religion, he deals with three difficulties for human agents to be holy. Quote, the first difficulty which makes doubtful the possibility of realizing in us the idea of humanity were pleasing to God, considering the holiness of the lawgiver and the lack of righteousness on our part, is the following. The law says, be holy in the conduct of your lives as your Father in heaven is holy. But this is the idea of the Son of God, which is being placed before us as model. The distance between the goodness which we ought to reflect in ourselves and the evil from which we start is, however, infinite. And so far as the deed is concerned, namely the conformity of the conduct of one's life to the holiness of the law, it is not exhaustible in any time. Nevertheless, the human being's moral constitution ought to agreement with this holiness. The latter must therefore be assumed in his disposition in the universal and pure maxim of the agreement of conduct with the law as the germ from which all good is to be developed, in a disposition which proceeds from a holy principle adopted by human being in his supreme maxim. And this is a change of heart which must itself be possible because it is a duty. Now the difficulty lies here, how can this disposition count for deed itself, when this deed is every time not generally but at each instant defective? End quote. In order to attain the highest good in the world, each agent must and at least can become holy. This can be seen as the condition of highest good in a person. Thus Kant maintain his interest of agents in the proportion. Then let me summarize this section. Thus, regarding the highest good, Kant has clearly taken agents of moral progress to its perfection into account. Subthesis 1, that Kant consistently thinks that in any moral community, the idea of God plays a role as a sovereign, and subthesis 2, the highest good has not only an aspect of a community, but also an aspect of a person in harmony between virtue and happiness. Kant's texts have shown that the two subtheses were Kant's stable thoughts, at least after the critical periods. Both the idea of God and the agent personal moral progress included in the concept of the highest good as a community. Then let us turn to the next section. In this section, I would like to show you why and for what is the idea of God needed. Why a community of human agents need the idea of God? The idea of God prima facie seems excessive for morality. Encrot and Chigner defend it by the moral psychological argument, though they hold the belief in God is essential for sustaining moral hope in the face of frailty and finitude, or avoiding demoralization. But it seems that human agents can and should build an ethical community by themselves, as if every agent acted for others' happiness, the highest good, consisting of virtuous persons and their happiness, would be realized. However, I like to oppose this non-theological reading in this section. I'd like to state subthesis 3 that without the idea of God, agent can know what should be done for others' happiness, and doing such action, even they can establish a morally good community, but they need the idea of God for knower of the fundamental attitude in the community. As we have seen, the highest good in a person consists of agent's virtue and happiness proportionate to it. Then the requisite for the highest good in person is to make the agent's fundamental attitude good. It translated a German word, die Gesinnung, into the fundamental attitude. In the quotations above, it is translated as disposition. Let me see, what is the fundamental attitude? It is firstly the first maxim of agent, but from Kant's text, the first subjective basis for the adoption maxim. And secondly, it is the fundamental attitude of every human. Secondly, that the fundamental attitude of every human agent, with few exceptions, is evil. Again, quote: "The human being is evil by nature, according to what acquaintance we have with him through experience. We cannot judge him otherwise, while we may presuppose this as subjectively necessary in every human being, even the best. Thirdly, it has the feature unknowable. What? Even the human being's inner experience of himself does not allow him to see through the depths of his heart, so that he could attain entirely secure cognition through self-observation of the basis of maxim to which he subscribes, and of their purity and stability." Why is a fundamental attitude unknowable? Kant repeatedly emphasizes the inclination of self-deception or inner lie in human agents. It is also key for the one to be virtue. Only the descent into the hell of self-cognition can pave the way to godliness. Lord Papish says, no matter how imprisoned, we do not and cannot directly contradict the truth of what we know. Instead, we divert our attention by focusing on something that tempers the experience of having to ascend to this cognition. But this unknowability helps our moral progress. It is possible that the claim on self-deception and unknowability of the fundamental attitudes is factive and psychological. Still, this can be defended by showing that the unknowability of the fundamental attitude sustaining each agent's infinite moral progress. Marx suggests that we have a moral interest in assenting to the proposition that we are evil, an interest which derives from our objective duty of moral self-perfection, and which ground a regulative prescription to presuppose our evil character in the context of a more ascetic, where we pursue the aim of moral self-perfection. By the way, if it is really unknowable, there must be a knower. If one commits both statements, 1. Every agent aims at making their fundamental attitude good. 2. Any agent cannot know their fundamental attitude precisely. Then there must be some being who can know the value precisely. The precise value, good or evil, each agent's fundamental attitude throughout their whole choices and behaviors. It is required for the attainment of the highest good in a person, and even for the promotion of it. For it is irrational that each agent is certain that there is no possibility to obtain a fair and precise evaluation, as if students do their school assignment believing there are no teachers who can grade them. Let me summarize. Thus, even in the text of religion, even agent being in a good community, every agent needs to presuppose the idea of God as a knower of their fundamental attitude. It seems to follow that agents need to assume the idea of God as omniscient, but then another problem can be raised. When we turn to the final section, it will show a thread of the divine omniscience and a theological model as a solution. If we consider the idea of God as omniscient, the agent's freedom will be in danger, since it seems so strong that God knows everything, including the value of the agent's fundamental attitude in his foreknowledge, even before each agent acts freely. Then there is apparently no room for agents' moral progress, including many choices and actions, but it seems just a matter of two static values of the fundamental attitude, good or evil. A theological model can solve this problem. As a possible solution is that to explain the divine foreknowledge by the theological model of Luis de Molina, Scantia Media, Wolfgang Eater, researcher in Japan, that according to Molina's theological model, claiming that Molina's libertarian account of freedom is in Kant's immediate vicinity, God has foreknowledge of all actions which agents would do in all possible situations through the counterfactors of freedom. Eater states that counterfactors of freedom are concerned with hypothetical scenarios and state how a finite free agent would act in a fully specified possible situation. They are formulated as if person P were in situation S, they would freely perform an action A. This model can save us from the danger of divine omniscience. It allows us not to assume that the divine judge consists of two values. Rather, it assigns responsibility to each human agent to actualize one action of all possible actions freely. As agents change their situation, they change their action. This theological model also illustrates how an agent improves and matures within an ethical community. As an agent improves the community she belongs to, she changes the condition clause of counterfactors of freedom, and hence the consequence clause, namely her action freely actualized. Interestingly, it differs from a well-known model of Kantian virtue as a courage or strength. I'd like to conclude this presentation with a brief summary. I have shown through this presentation this thesis. Kant's conception of moral community involves an aspect of agents' own moral progress to their moral perfection, which drives them to assume the idea of God as a judge or knower. And it has contained three subtheses. One, Kant consistently thinks that in any moral community, the idea of God plays a role as a sovereign. Two, the highest good has not only an aspect of the community, but also an aspect of a person in a harmony between virtue and happiness. Three, without the idea of God, agents can know what should be done for others' happiness, and doing such actions, even they can establish a morally good community, but they need the idea of God for a knower of their fundamental attitude in the very community. While to establish an ethical commonwealth or a kind of community consisting of virtuous agents is a core part of the final end of morality, for each agent to aim at moral perfection, the idea of God also plays an essential role in the very moral community. This is all. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nakano-san, for your stimulating talk and leaving enough time, sufficient time for discussion. Yeah. So, does anyone have a question or comment? Please raise your hand through the hand raising function. Yes, please. Karin-san.
Yes, thanks. Yes, so I didn't want to ask the first question, yes, but maybe the others need a bit more time to think about theirs. Thanks for your very interesting talk. It's not really my area of study, so I was very much interested in learning more things. So I see the problem, yes, that you sketched out at the beginning as regards the religious or secular interpretations of the idea of the highest good and the role of God in the moral community. And I like your way of fleshing it out and assigning a very specific role or specific function to the idea of God. But I was wondering whether you could say a bit more about your take more generally about this tension between the secular and the religious reading. Yes, because it seems to me that that Kant, in the various contexts, is concerned with a secularizing reinterpretation of the content of Christian doctrine. And so it's maybe the dilemma between a purely secular and a purely religious reading is not really adequate if we take into account that Kant in all cases tries to reinterpret religious content into secular terms. Yeah, so there's a kind of movement from the purely religious context to a more secular context. So I was wondering what your view is on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment and question. Can I paraphrase your question? So you think Kant's own things is also paraphrasing religious Christian thought into more secular ones. Is this right? Understanding? Okay. But I cannot understand fully the tensions, the theological one and secular one you wanted to present to me. So could you explain? Could you explain once what is the tension?
Well, so maybe there is not really a tension in Kant's own works, but I think you pointed out a tension among commentators.
Yes.
Yes, so commentators maybe focus on either the more religious aspects or the more secular aspects. And so my question was, well, what do you think of the let's say the tension between the commentators?
Okay, then yes, my presentation focuses on the tension among commentators, but in context, it is not the different idea or separate idea in his text. It is connected in the process to be more perfect world or more perfect being in human agents. So I'd like to try in this presentation to show in context or textually clear this two conception is connected in deep or in basically.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay. Any other question or comment? Yes, please. Yeah, Noam-san. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the fascinating talk. It's very rich and a lot of interesting parts. I have one question about the conclusion. You say that in the conclusion we need the idea of God as a knower. Can you say a bit more what do you mean by needing an idea? Is it a belief in the existence of God that's a sort of a state of affair, or is it something weaker? We need the idea in order to represent the possibility of judging our own character. Is it really kind of belief like others, like Signale is claiming in many places?
You think it is same my suggestion and Signale's idea. Is it Is it understanding right? Okay. Then I think yes, the Chignell and Eckhart defend the role of God from the standpoint of humans' fragility of mind, I think. And it helps to hold the beliefs that we can change the world towards a better world. But my suggestion is rather much epistemic one. It concerns the start point, which human agent try to be good from. So a very little difference, but I think before our more fragility of mind, but the very start point we needed to certain that there are some newer or there are some precise judge to of our mind. So there's a bit difference, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay. Any other question or comment? Yes, please. Osawa-san.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. And your thesis seemed to be I would call the juxtaposition thesis about theological and secular reading. But you might want to proceed that model into an integrated model by saying, not just saying that the God is the knower, but also the human agent is a limited knower, so to speak. And also, you can possibly say that the human agent is a limited sovereign, so to speak. So I'm wondering if you can push your reading into some kind of integrated model of religious and secular readings.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask, it is a question about I should more press my interpretation to human limited feature. Is this right?
So you're saying you're already saying what I said.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I think the human agency is in a way limited, but if this I press this line too strong, it is not right in my past expression. Human agency is enough to do or enough act morally, but metaphysically or epistemic possibility, we need the idea of God in very slight but important way, I think. So I didn't want to stress or didn't want to emphasize human impotence. So is it is it an answer to your question?
Okay, so then what's the position of the radical evil? Then I think original title of the talks was included.
So, yes, radical evil is a very interesting topic, but I cannot deal with today. Oh, radical evil, yes. What? I want to try to understand the responsibility is about radical evil. The responsibility is in human agency, not the just original thing. Augustinian way, the put into human very basic features. I at the present, I rather agree with Laura Papish or Laura Papish's ways of thinking. It can be understand the more social way, like human anthropological passion, or some passion to money or passion to a parallel person to something is the radical evils more radical evils source, but actually I cannot fully understand about radical evils study field, so please stop my opinion here. So sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a question concerning the sovereignty.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least in the groundwork, the sovereignty does not belong to God, but to every person. You know, in your citation, we can read out that point. You know, every person is the member of the kingdom of ends, but at the same time, every person is the sovereign in the kingdom of ends. You know, and that reading accords with Kant's idea of autonomy very well. But I think your reading is somewhat against, you know, the idea of autonomy, moral autonomy. Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
how would you answer?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. Yes, as I said, I think only idea of God or God is only sovereign or possible position to sovereign because for autonomy it is suffice to assume the human energy can join the process of law giving.
Yeah.
But in their in administration of the kingdom, there must be a top position of God, and the feature, as I thought it, without needs and with unlimited resources is not humans' features. They are always in needs and in limited resources. So I think the text without needs and with unlimited resources is very important in the future. So autonomy can stand if human beings, human agents, are not a sovereign but only a member. Is this an answer of your question?
Well, yeah, but Kant clearly writes, you know, every person is the member and at the same time as the sovereign in the moral community of kingdom of ends.
I didn't really remember the text at the same time the sovereign, but only I remember in the kingdom there is a head and there is members and Kant explains the features of each, and I times and times reading the text, but I cannot remember at the same time human beings as members and sovereign. So in at the present, my interpretation is such as.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other question or comment?
Gerardo, there is a comment in the chat. I don't know if you want to read it.
Oh, okay. There's a comment in the chat.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but I must leave. The present interpretation could sound as moralization, which might be distortive. Maybe the Kantian concept of dignity which an agent can give via his action could be further involved into interpreting and reconstructing Kant's moral and morality within rather secular way. Nakano-san, did you get the point? Can you,
Oh,
would you
please
like to
wait.
respond?
Please wait.
Yeah. Okay, this is a comment for you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we still have 3 minutes. No, we still have, yeah, almost 8 minutes. Yes. Does anyone raise a question? Or would anyone raise a question or a comment? Yes, then I have another question. Yes, God can give us hope when we strive for morality or when we strive for perpetual peace. You know, perpetual peace is another final end in Kant's philosophy. That might be political end, but also moral end too, I believe. You know, but in that, when he talks about the perpetual peace, you know, he never mentions God. You know, he only mentions nature. You know, nature helps us to achieve perpetual peace or something like that. Yeah. So my question is, it seems to me that Kant is trying to not mention God in many cases, you know, in perpetual peace and in groundwork too, as I said, you know. So how would you explain that point?
He avoiding the word.
Yeah.
Yes, but in the toward the perpetual peace,
Yeah.
Kant indeed indeed avoids the word God, but he rather mentions the grace in various way in the his note. So
Yeah.
it is always a very very narrow problem. I think I think he is always have got in his mind to think the whole system of moral moral world or final end of morality. So it is very brief answers, but indeed he avoids the word, but always he is thinking and thinking of God in his own more philosophical system, I think.
But why? You know, he mentions even provision in perpetual peace, but he never mentions God, but nature. That I think that's very curious.
Yes.
Yeah, but anyway, someone is waiting. Luis-san, please. Yeah.
Okay, so many thanks, Heidi, for this very interesting talk. I thought it was very clear, and I really liked the way you presented the different interpretations. And I learned also a lot about Kant's approach. It's not also not my topic of expertise, the practical philosophy. But I was just wondering, because if I understood you correctly, you were making room for God in your interpretation of Kant's practical philosophy, perhaps a little bit more than other interpreters do. And we are here in a very cosmopolitan Congress, and of course there are people from all different countries. And I was just wondering whether this Kantian conception of God and attempt to bring together morality and religion, at least from this perspective, whether this is compatible with different religions and different approaches to divinity and to God, because depending on the religion you have, maybe God would not play such a role as regards happiness, or well, I don't know. What do you think? How do you read this? Do you think this is compatible with different religions? And yeah.
Yes. Firstly, I think yes. Firstly, I think yes. As Kant says in religion, there is a much kind, not he, Kant thinks there's no much kind of religion, many kind of religion, but only different behaviors. This is a too optimistic way of thinking, I think, but I think this is the right line to think. The idea of God today, I stressed to is not so thick concept, but very thin concept, and it is always a metaphysical possibility to think there is some being, no one's mind or penetrate one's mind. So it is not. It does not concern the difference between many religious details. So I hopefully thinks it is okay. The very indifferent religion, we can share one and same idea of God, very same way.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah, it's almost the time. So we would like to close the first session for today. And
Yes.
thank you very much, Nakano-san, for your very clear
Thank you very much.
and stimulating talk. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Then, well, without a break, shall we go on to the
Yes. Yeah.
next session, next talk? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the next speaker is Igarashi-san from Kyoto University, and the title is, please say it for us. Yeah.
Okay, so so good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. So my name is Ryosuke Igarashi, and it is a great honor to have the opportunity to present here today. And I would like to begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to the organizers for providing such an excellent platform. And I also thank Teda Sensei for kindly introducing me. And I'm not sure if I'm still young, but anyway, as he introduced, I'm an associate professor at Kyoto University, and where my primary research focuses on Kant's logic. And additionally, I serve as a senior research manager at the Kyoto Institute of Philosophy. It is an initiative dedicated to addressing social challenges through philosophy and broader humanities and social sciences. And I'll share the website of this institute. Sorry, this is just a promotion. And so maybe my doctoral dissertation, though not yet published, analyze early modern logic through mathematical models, and use these models to compare the logical systems of Leibniz and Kant. And today, as an extension of that line of research, I aim to shed light on the significance of Kant's analytic and synthetic judgment and the process of concept formation. And for this presentation, I'll mainly be reading from my prepared manuscript. And to facilitate a smoother discussion, I will share the PDF file of this manuscript. Sorry, let me try. Yes, in the chat. Okay. But I'd like to note a few points. This is a translated version of Japanese paper, and it contains several imperfections. For example, the differences section is entirely absent. And the paper has not been published in any language other than Japanese. So, well, I intended to develop this work further and publish it as an English paper in the future. I kindly ask that you refrain from citing or quoting this manuscript for now. Just be safe. Yeah. Okay, then let us begin. And I'll share the manuscript. Wait. Maybe this. Okay, can you see the manuscript? Okay, thank you. Then let us start. And the title of this talk is How Concepts Are Expanded, the Problem of Definition in Kant's Theory of Concept Formation. And the first introduction. So this paper aimed to elucidate the positive implications of Kant's analytic-synthetic distinction drawing upon the theory of definition presented in the Critique of Pure Reason, especially in the transcendental methodology. And while this distinction has traditionally been viewed as delineating the limits of human cognition, this paper argues for its constitutive role in concept formation. And Kant's theoretical philosophy famously employ the analytic synthetic distinction alongside the a priori and a posteriori, and primarily to demarcate the boundary of knowledge. And analytic judgment, in short, explicate predicates already contained within the concept of the subject, whereas synthetic judgments expand cognition by attributing predicates not inherent to the subject. And to illustrate, all bodies are extended constitute an analytic judgment, because the predicate extended is intrinsic to the concept of body. Conversely, all bodies are heavy represents a synthetic judgment, as the predicate are heavy or having weight or something like that, as new information to the concept of body. However, our closer examination of Kant's theory of definition, particularly as developed in the transcendental methodology, reveals that the process of conceptual expansion transcends this basic framework. And Kant envisions a dynamic interplay between the analysis of provisional definitions and synthesis of new concepts acquired through empirical inquiry. So this process can lead to the revision and refinement of initial definitions, thereby highlighting a more nuanced and generative function for the analytic synthetic distinction. Yeah. And this paper will proceed as follows. Section 2 will revisit the analytic synthetic distinction, addressing its inherent complexities and outlining the scope of Kant's theory of definition. In section 3, we prove the transcendental methodology, providing an overview of Kant's theory of definition and its general characteristics. And section 4, the crux of this investigation will examine the dynamic interplay of analytic and synthetic judgment in concept formation, emphasizing their positive contributions to this process. And finally, and actually, this part is a kind of appendix. And so if I don't have time, I have to skip this part. But section 5 will consider remaining challenges within Kant's theory of concept formation and explore the potential role of regulative ideas as discussed in the transcendental dialectic in shaping empirical concept. Okay, section 2, the analytic synthetic distinction and its challenges. So this section examines the challenges surrounding Kant's analytic synthetic distinction, setting the stage for deeper exploration of its role in concept formation. So Kant's distinction has been subject to various critiques, which, following Anderson, can be categorized as follows. The first one is formal restriction, which say the distinction applies only to subject-predicate judgment. The second one is skepticism about inclusion, namely the notion of containment within concepts lack logical clarity. And the third one is lack of objectivity. So conceptual content varies across individuals and communities. And the first critique stems from the limitations of traditional term logic, which serves as a foundation for Kant's system. And this logic prioritizes these concepts as foundational elements and focusing on their relationships within judgment and inferences. And consequently, the analytic synthetic distinction confined to subject-predicate judgments, and actually particularly categorical judgments, reflects this historical constraint. However, this limitation may be less problematic when considering the specific aim of term logic. So its primary concern lies in structuring and systematizing existing knowledge through conceptual tools. So this differs from modern logic, which emphasizes validity of inferences. Notably, fields like knowledge representation and formal ontology in modern information science echo such an approach of term logic. So highlighting the enduring relevance of concepts and their interrelations. Thus, critique one might arise from a misunderstanding of the distinct goals and focuses on Kant's logical frameworks. So addressing the second critique requires a closer examination of Kant's logic. The concepts, the foundational elements of term logic, are understood through two perspectives. First one is intention, and second one is extension. And Kant elucidates this distinction like this. So every concept as a partial concept is contained in the representation of things as ground its cognition, namely as marks. These things are contained under it. In the former respect, every concept has an intention, in the other, extension. So, for example, consider the concept of human. So traditionally understood as containing the partial concepts animal and rational. So this partial concept constitutes its intentions. And while the individual to whom this concept applies form its extension, like us, right? And crucially, any partial concept serving as a ground of cognition is termed a mark. So this approach to conceptual content with roots in the Port-Royal logic, Partist and modern logic, including Leibniz Wolffian school. So Kant's notion of analyticity rests on the premise that the inclusion relation between concepts as an intention is an objective logical relation contrary to the critic. And furthermore, scholarship has demonstrated that the logic of Kant's time, particularly in Leibniz's system, treated the inclusion relation of intentions as a formal structure akin to an algebraic system with conceptual composition as an operation. I mean, a mathematical operation. So this formalization finds parallels in modern information science, like formal concept analysis or something like that. While the correspondence between this informal framework and actual cognitive processes remain an open question, I think the inclusion relation underpinning analytic judgment should not be dismissed as mere metaphor, as Quine said, but rather a concept with substantial content. And finally, the critique of objectivity, which asserts that the conceptual content is relative and contingent on linguistic conventions, can be addressed through Kant's own words in the transcendental methodology. He says here, like as follows: an empirical concept cannot be defined at all, but only explicated. For since we have in it only some marks of a certain kind of object of the senses, so it is never certain whether by means of the word that designates the same object, one does not sometimes think more of these marks, but another time fewer of them. This thus, in the concept of gold, one person might think, besides its weight, color, ductility, its property of not rusting, while another might know nothing about this. So one makes use of certain marks only as long as they are sufficient for making distinctions. So now observations, however, take some away and as some, and therefore the concept never remains within secure boundaries. So Kant acknowledges here that the variability and the provisional nature of empirical concept, so subject to revision through inquiry. So he distinguishes between mere designation and the complete concept of a thing. Since when, for example, are water and its properties under discussion, one will not stop at what it intended by the word water, but rather are advanced experiments. And word with the few marks that are attached to it is to constitute only a designation and not a concept of a thing. Thus, a putative definition is nothing other than the determination of the word. So Kant's insight here, it would seem implies that the very variability of empirical concept, their susceptibility to revision and refinement rather highlights the importance of analytic judgment. So by rigorously clarifying the specific marks contained within the given definition, analytic judgment explores the precise point of divergence between concepts as held by different individuals at different stages of inquiry. So this process of clarification, while not generative of new knowledge, is indispensable for the critical evaluation and advancement of empirical knowledge. So it allows us to identify the precise point of this disagreement, thereby facilitating a more focused and productive pursuit of objective knowledge through empirical investigation. Okay, but however, this interpretation raises further critical questions, namely, how does Kant characterize definition within his theoretical philosophy, and what roles do analytic synthetic judgments play in the process of concept formation outlined in his theory of definition? So the following sections will address these questions by examining the transcendental methodology and Kant's logic lectures, ultimately revealing a more dynamic interplay between analysis and synthesis in concept formation than traditionally recognized. Okay, third section, the nature of definition in Kant. This section examines Kant's conceptual definition as articulated in the transcendental methodology, while acknowledging so that Kant's logic lectures present nuance and so this is just a remark that Kant logic lectures present nuances in the understanding of definition. This analysis will primarily focus on the critique and the transcendental methodology with supplementary differences to other texts as needed. So central to Kant's theory of definition is the recognition that various marks attributed to a concept possess different statuses and relations to the object and the other concepts. So of particular importance is the distinction between necessary marks and accidental marks. So, and within necessary marks, the further distinction between primitive and constitutive marks and attributes. So necessary marks are also termed essential marks, are those that must always be found in the represented thing. In contrast, accidental marks are those that can be separated from the concept of the thing. So necessary marks, as I said, are further divided in those that belong to the thing as a ground of other marks, namely constitutive marks, and those that belong to the thing as just a consequence of other marks, namely attributes. So only constitutive marks qualify as components of a definition, as accidental marks are inherently unsuitable, and attributes, as we shall see, are excluded by the precision required of a proper definition. Okay, and Kant outlines 4 essential characteristics of a definition in the methodological transcendental methodology. First one is clarity, which says that the defining marks are clearly presented, and sufficiency, which means the defining marks are exhaustively enumerated. And third one is precision. The concept contains only the necessary marks with no redundancy. And the last one is originality, which say the determination of determining marks is independent of other concepts or definitions. And clearly, following Bohr's terminology entails our complete analysis of the intention of a concept. Clarity. If we follows Bohr's terminology, clarity entails a complete analysis of the intention of a concept. While sufficiency ensures that the concept includes enough marks to distinguish its object from all others. And precision demands that the marks included in the concept are strictly necessary for thorough concept, thereby limiting the determination to constitutive marks. And the originality emphasizes that the inclusion of a mark in a definition is not derived from or dependent upon other concepts or definitions. So importantly, Kant argues in the transcendental methodology that empirical concept cannot fully satisfy these requirements for complete definition. The definition of an empirical concept, therefore, is more accurately termed as an exposition. However, this does not render such exposition meaningless. Kant states that definitions in philosophy, including those empirical and a priori concepts, are often incomplete, representing propositions that are not really definitions but are true, and approximations to definitions. But despite their incompleteness, such expositions can be used with great advantage. So their utility lies in their capacity to identify objects of inquiry, thus initiating empirical investigation. So in essence, we employ provisional definitions to identify objects of experience. Through experience, we acquire new marks and devise the initial definition. So this iterative process allows us our provisional definition to progressively approximate a complete definition. So this dynamic process highlights the crucial role of analytic synthetic judgment in the formation of conceptual empirical concept. So the subsequent section will explicate this dynamic and focusing on the interplay of analytic synthetic judgment in the foundation of empirical concept. So the fourth section, the dynamic interplay of analytic synthetic judgment in concept formation. As established, empirical concept formation begins with a provisional definitions that identifies the object or class of object, its extension. So this initial definition arises from the coordinated activity of sensibility, imagination, and understanding, which unify the manifold of intuition to present an empirical object. The concepts are then acquired through comparison, reflection, and abstraction. Kant's classical example illustrates this process. The concept tree is derived by abstracting common marks from several representations of the kind of trees. Crucially, these initial marks may be confused. Various across individuals include unnecessary or derivative elements, or even contain features not truly belonging to the object. So following the establishment of this provisional definition, analytic and synthetic judgments operate in tandem to progressively refine it towards a more complete and accurate representation. So analytic judgment, as discussed, function to clarify the initially obscure marks through analysis. While not directly expanding cognition, this clarification facilitates both the subsequent expansion through synthetic judgment and convergence of diverse individual definitions toward a more universally valid concept. Synthetic judgment conversely expands cognition by adding previously unconsidered marks to the concept through empirical inquiry. However, the impact of synthetic judgment on the concept is multifaceted, contingent upon the relationship between the existing definition and newly acquired marks. So one function of synthetic judgment is, of course, to add attributes that result from the constitutive marks of the concept. So this is like maybe typical characterization of synthetic judgment. So Kant's example, all bodies have weight, demonstrates this. The attribute's weight is added to the constitutive mark of extension in the concept of body. So this process leaves the provisional definition, the constitutive marks themselves unaltered, merely appending a derived property. So as I said, this represents the typical role of synthetic judgment as are commonly understood in the context of the analytic synthetic distinction. However, the role of synthetic judgment extends beyond the mere addition of attributes. So they can also modify the constitutive marks themselves, revising the definition towards greater accuracy. So this revision can occur through three distinct processes. So first, synthetic judgment can introduce new constitutive marks. For instance, a scientist initially defining gold by its weight, color, and toughness might discover through experimentation that non-rusting is another constitutive mark. This type of synthetic judgment enhances the sufficiency of the definition by enabling the distinction of gold from other metals that might share the initial characteristics, but are susceptible to rust. So this process is typically prompted by the encounter of counterexamples. That is, objects that satisfy the provisional definition but do not belong to the intended object. And secondly, synthetic judgment can define the precision of a definition by elucidating dependencies between marks and eliminating redundant elements. So Kant's example of the mathematical concept, circle, illustrates this. So the initial definition, a curved line, every point of which is the same distance from a single one, includes the redundant mark curve. So the geometrical theorem that every line, each point of which is equally distant from a single one, is curved to be derivative property and attribute rather than a constitutive mark. While this example pertains to mathematical concept, the principle applies equally to empirical concepts. And thirdly, the discovery of new marks and identification of dependencies between them can lead to a complete revision of the definition. So the discovery that properties of water are grounded in its molecular structure exemplifies this. So this new knowledge established the molecular structure as a constitutive mark, rendering other properties as derivative attributes. Consequently, initial marks defining water are taken away and replaced with a more fundamental mark of its molecular structure. So this process enhances the originality of the definition by grounding it in more fundamental principles. So this represents the most radical form of conceptual revision, where the core defining marks are fundamentally altered. However, this revision remains valid as long as it accurately identifies the same empirical object. So the aim of empirical inquiry is to expand knowledge about that object. So in summary, the role of analytic and synthetic judgments in concept formation can be schematized as follows. And first, analytic judgment clarifies marks within the definition, and it enhancing clarity. And second, synthetic judgment are the attributes derived from the constitutive marks. This is a typical function of synthetic judgment. But it's also the other functions, like add new constitutive marks, this enhancing sufficiency, and remove mistakenly included attributes, and this enhances precision, and combine B and C to revise the definition with more fundamental marks. and it enhances our originality. So this analysis reveals concept formation to be dynamic process involving the interplay of analytic and synthetic judgment, capable of leading to revisions of the definition itself. So the distinction between analytic and synthetic judgment, therefore, is not static, but fluid and evolving with the progress of inquiry. So this dynamic conception of the analytic-synthetic distinction resonates with the actual practice of scientific inquiry. When confronted with an unknown phenomenon, we begin with our provisional definition and define it through empirical investigation, simultaneously expanding our knowledge of the phenomenon. So these processes mirror the development and maturation of scientific fields. So by re-examining the analytic-synthetic distinction through a methodological lens, so we can appreciate its significance beyond its role in delineating the limits of cognition. It provides a framework for understanding the process of scientific inquiry itself, capturing its dynamic and normative structure. So this arguably explains the enduring relevance of this distinction despite the critiques it has faced, and highlight its positive contribution to our understanding of concept formation. Okay, the fifth section, circularity, concept formation, and the role of regulative ideas. So as I said, this actually the main argument of this paper is already finished in the section 4. So this is a kind of appendix of this paper, but it focuses on the function of regulative ideas in the empirical concept formation. So this section addresses the problem of circularity in Kant's theory of concept formation, drawing upon the preceding analysis to offer a resolution. So this problem, as highlighted by Anderson, concerns the apparent presuppositions of very concepts to be acquired within the process of comparison, reflection, and abstraction. This analysis will demonstrate that overcoming this circularity necessitates the function of regulative ideas. So the crux of the circularity problem lies in how the objects or representations thereof compared during concept acquisition through abstraction can be grouped into a single class. So in Kant's example, several are examples of tree or several representations of some kind of trees share the mark of tree by possessing leaves, branches, and trunk. However, the specific form of these features differs significantly across these three types. So it seems then that grouping these diverse representations into the class tree requires the prior possession of the concept tree itself. And I should say this apparent circularity is not unique to Kant theory, but arises for any account of concept acquisition through abstraction. So addressing this problem requires recognizing that the criterion for identifying a class of objects must be external to the marks or intention of these objects. Because circularity arises precisely when the intention to be acquired is used to define the class of object from which it is supposedly abstracted. So this analysis proposes that the regulative idea of the systematic unity of the world, along with its associated principles of homogeneity and specification and continuity, provides such external criteria. At the outset of concept formation through abstraction, the cross-up object and the concept abstract from it can be entirely arbitrary. We could, for instance, form the concept things with 4 legs by grouping dog and desk. The crucial point is that the concept thus formed need not be correspond to our established classifications. They merely reflect an abstraction of shared marks. However, our conventional classifications are not arbitrary. There exist appropriate methods of classification, such as grouping dog with animal and desk with furniture. So the idea of systematic unity and its associated principles guide the selection of appropriate classification from among the initially arbitrary ones. So the reason we classify dog with cat as animals, distinguished from them from desk, is that this classification better accords with the systematic unity of the world. So this idea of systematic unity justifies the inclusion of both dog and cat within the broader class animal. So first, the principles of homogeneity, specification, and continuity give substantive to this notion of systemic unity. While homogeneity and specification require hierarchical organization of classes according to our genus-species relations, the principle of continuity is particularly relevant here. This principle says all varieties of species bound one another and permit no transition to one another by a leap, but only through every smaller degree of distinction. So applying this to the example, there is a relatively continuous transition from dog to cat through increasing differentiations, whereas a transition from dog to desk involves a significant leap. This is because dog and cat share numerous marks, while dog and desk share few beyond having 4 legs. So that's the principle of continuity favors classifying dog with cat within the class animal. So this analysis offers 3 further points of classification. First, our conventional classifications should not be viewed as fixed or pre-given. Rather, they are defined through ongoing empirical inquiry and reflection on systemic unity, with initially abstract arbitrary classification progressively approximating the appropriate ones. So this dynamic process reflects the nature of scientific practice too, I think. So secondly, this account positions the regulative ideas as instrumental in establishing the provision definitions discussed earlier, thereby eliminating the connection between empirical concept formation and metaphysics. Thirdly, the reflective power of judgment, as discussed in the Critique of Judgment, plays a crucial role in enabling this systemic unity, demonstrating continuity between Kant's theoretical philosophy and the questions addressed in the third critique. So in the light of this analysis, the circularity problem arises from assuming the systemic unity that is only achieved through empirical inquiry and reflection. So the problem stems from the neglecting the role of regulative ideas of systemic unity of the world and its principles in guiding the classification of empirical objects. It arises from seeking a pre-given systematic classification with the objects themselves, rather than recognizing it as a product of inquiry guided by these ideas. Okay, conclusion. Then this paper has sought to eliminate the positive implications of analytic synthetic distinction and a cornerstone of Kant's transcendental logic by examining its function within the theory of definition presented in the Critique of Pure Reason, and especially the traditional transcendental methodology. So the analysis has demonstrated that these 2 forms of judgment contribute to a dynamic and intricate process of empirical concept formation, wherein they interact reciprocally and can even lead to revisions of the initial definition itself. Furthermore, by addressing the problem of circularity in concept formation, this investigation has revealed that the essential role played by the regulative idea of systemic unity of the world, another central theme within transcendental logic in the realm of empirical concepts. So these findings suggest that the process of concept formation within Kant's theoretical philosophy can be interpreted as reflecting the essence and norms of scientific practice. However, a comprehensive development of this interpretation necessitates a thorough examination of the critic leveled against analytic-synthetic distinction, alongside a deeper investigation into the nature of scientific practice itself. Yes, so maybe that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Igarashi-san, for your very interesting talk. And yes, now we have, 20 minutes, just 20 minutes for discussion. Who wants to start?
Ryosuke, could you perhaps stop sharing your screen?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Eato-san, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this fascinating account. So telling us that Kant is so much richer than it would seem when just reading the pertinent paragraphs of the Prolegomena about synthetic and analytic judgments. My question concerns the following. You focused on empirical concepts and empirical concept formation and its possible provisionary nature and the possibility of revisions and so on. But how about a priori concepts and concepts, key concepts in metaphysics, which are obviously of great importance in the Kantian approach? Is there something similar with regard to these concepts, or is there a fundamental difference between these empirical concepts and concept formation with regard to them?
Actually, thank you. Actually, that's a very important and difficult question. To be honest, I avoid mentioning a priori concepts in this paper because it's implies various problems of just you pointed out. So yes, so a priori concepts has a similar characteristics with our empirical concept because we also cannot have a complete definition of a priori concepts, right? But still, yeah, the reason of this conclusion, it seems to me a little bit different for these two kinds of concepts. Because for empirical concepts, it stems from just like a reality or just a mere fact that we cannot have a complete knowledge or complete understanding of the nature. But still, in the case of our a priori or pure concept of understanding, the situations are completely different because these concepts are just derived from our understanding, right? And it can be captured through the investigation about the structure or classification of judgment. But still, we cannot have a complete definition of this. And I think I can't explain why we cannot have a complete definition of definition of a pure concept. But he only says, like, if I'm correct, just we cannot have a complete analysis of concepts, right? So it means that there is no end to distinguish or not analyze some certain concept. So this is the main reason for pure concepts not to be our complete not to be a complete concept of things. So in a sense, sorry, I maybe talked too much, but yeah. the point is, maybe there is several mechanisms where by which we cannot have a complete definition of concepts. One is just impossibility of a complete analysis, and the other is maybe get just impossibility to get a complete knowledge or complete understanding of the nature. And the case of empirical knowledge or empirical concept, maybe we have to appeal to the both principles. But in the case of our pure concept, maybe we have to appeal to only the first principle. So this is maybe the difference of these two kinds of concept.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Can I have
Edo-san.
one?
Edo-san, please. Yeah.
Thank you. One more point, please. I was thinking, would you suggest that there's something similar compared to the importance of empirical investigation and with regard to concept formation with regard to empirical concepts when it comes to, let's say, the practice of metaphysics as a scientific discipline? Is there somehow is the concept formation basically tied to the practice of doing metaphysics, also with possible revisions going on? Would you see a parallel here?
Sorry, maybe I can get your point. So maybe is your question about the relationship between empirical concepts and metaphysics, or sorry,
No,
could you explain more?
The question was whether there's something similar compared to the importance of empirical investigation and the complex relationship to regulative ideas on the side of metaphysics. So that metaphysical concepts are in the process of formation when metaphysics is done as a science or as a proto-science, or
yeah. So interesting question, but maybe I cannot have a concrete answer to that question. And yeah, sorry, maybe it's that question beyond my understanding.
Okay,
so sorry about that. Yeah, because I'm not actually metaphysics is not my area of research, and I just mentioned that just its function in the process of concept formation, and maybe there are several kind of architecturic structure about the metaphysical principles or concepts, but I cannot think about answer about this kind of question. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other question? Yes, please. Karin-san.
Yes, thank you for your talk. I thought it was very interesting. In fact, I had a similar question to Wolfgang, yes, so I'm not going to repeat it, but it was also my concern. But I have another one, because to be honest, I was not completely convinced that for Kant, synthetic judgments somehow contribute to producing definitions of concepts. So for instance, take the well-known example of gold is yellow. Yeah, gold is a yellow metal. So according to Kant, the judgments that attributes the yellowness to the gold is an analytic one. But of course, it is very well possible that actually we need to do empirical investigations to identify a mark that we attribute to the concept as part of what the concept is, yes, or of a mark that is part of the very concept of the thing. So I was wondering if you if we should maybe distinguish more clearly between the question, how do we as finite human beings actually discover and identify certain features of gold, in this case, on the one hand, which might be a matter of, of synthesis. And on the other hand, on the other hand, the question, what is necessarily in the concept? Yes, and in that case, we abstract from the question concerning our actual discovery of certain marks and simply focus on what we take to be constitutive of the very object of gold. Yeah, so that is a kind of objection to your suggestion that synthetic judgments are necessary for the to establish the very definition of the concept.
Mhm. Okay, so first, let me start with our answer. Like maybe this is a problem of expression, but I don't think synthetic judgment are like create or make the definition of our concept. Because the definition of concept is made in the process of maybe abstraction or some other kind of just acquisition of concept. For in the Kant example, maybe we can have the definition of tree just looking at the several representations of trees, and then we get the maybe confused and not analyzed definition or understanding of trees, right? In this case, we have a kind of provisional definition, but it is completely confused. Then analytic judgment, synthetic judgment can work. Analytic judgment can analyze this very confused, obscure definition into several kind of marks, like our gold is yellow or something like that. So in a sense, I think analytic judgment are close to the initial process of defining some kind of concepts or objects. Then, but still, we are through our empirical inquiry, we also change this concept, this definition of concept, right? I think this happens and Kant presuppose in the scientific investigation. And in this case, as I said, primarily, how can I say? Maybe the core function of synthetic judgment is just add another new mark into the subject, right? So this is core function of synthetic judgment. Still, when we think or re-examine the definition of concept, this kind of function serves as sometimes defining concepts, yes, of the object. So this is my basic understanding, and I'm not sure if this kind of answer answer your questions, but how do you think about this?
Well, so it occurred to me while I was listening to your answer, I think that maybe I assume a more strict definition of what a synthetic judgment is.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I take it to be always in the form of a proposition, whereas maybe you take it to be any type of adding a mark to a concept. And so maybe I would agree on a kind of broader, on the assumption that the term synthetic judgment also covers other types of cognitive activity than really propositions. Yes, so maybe that would be a way of agreeing on this issue. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other question? Well, your talk seemed to be very interesting to me, but I'm not sure. I'm not confident that I understood your talk sufficiently. So I may ask a very stupid question, but well,
yeah,
I
please.
wonder what's the difference between the scientific, empirical scientific research and concept formation in your theory. You were just talking about the empirical scientific research, you know, not the concept formation, it
Yes.
seems to me. So I think my wondering has something to do with Ayrton-san's question, you know, metaphysics is possible through the construction of concepts, right? Yeah, kind of formation of concepts. Yeah, so there should be some similarity between concept formation of the empirical scientific, excuse me, what do you call, concept formation with metaphysics? But you are just focusing on the empirical scientific research. Yeah. So what's the difference? Or are they the same thing? Concept formation and yeah.
So first of all, of course, our scientific investigation is not equal to our like concept formation.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Just but still, I think necessarily the scientific investigation contains the concept formation as a process of investigation. So that's my yeah, that's what I meant. And in this sense, I think that it's core of the empirical investigation. I mean, the kind of concept formation. So that's my stance. And in this respect, I think there are quite clear similarities between the Kant's theory of this analytic synthetic distinction and modern like scientific investigations. That's one point. And second point
yes.
are like constructing our maybe concept is maybe it's a, if I'm correctly understood, it's a kind of our task or job of metaphysics or something like that, right? But still, in a sense, there are strong similarities between scientific investigation and metaphysics because they are both they are like in any sense the conceptual formation contains our synthetic judgment in Kant's sense, right? But in empirical investigation, we are maybe just have a posteriori synthetic judgment. But in the field of metaphysics, we have to seek the a priori synthetic judgment. So this kind of difference makes the complete like gap between our empirical concepts or just scientific investigation metaphysics, right? Still, I think our like pure reason as a several principles are organizing our experiences, which I showed in the 5th section. In a sense, our metaphysics not only are like constructed or some kind of scientific kind of science business to be present in the future, but also as a kind of regulative principles in our empirical investigation. So this is maybe my kind of rough idea between the relation between empirical investigation and metaphysics. So I'm not sure still this is enough answer to your questions. So,
yeah, thank you. Well, we still have several minutes, several more minutes. Does anyone want to ask a question or give a comment? Yes, please.
Yeah.
Luis-san.
Yeah, thanks. So many thanks, Hirosuke. That was really good. I really liked your paper. And I have a question somewhat related to the previous one and also to the first one, because I was wondering, on your account, what is the role of Kant's account of concept formation for the scientist? So how do you see the relationship between what Kant is doing here and what the scientists are doing? Do you think that this account could be somehow useful for scientists, that they should somehow understand how concept formation works in this account when they are doing science? Or this is just the philosopher reflecting about science and doing something that has nothing to do with science, and the scientists do their work and the philosopher will do also its work? So how do you see this?
Okay, so maybe if I'm correct, your question is about like a practical or practical significance in the modern scientific methodology.
Precisely.
Yeah, but in the sense, I don't like are intended to be a kind of positive opposition or some kind of how can I say? I don't meant to. I didn't I'm not intended to give like kind of methodological proposals for scientific investigations. My paper is just it's just to understand our Kantian understanding of our analytic synthetic judgment. And in the history of research, I think there are lots of critics of the distinction between analytic synthetic judgment. I think even in the Kant's own era, right? But still, maybe many people have a kind of intuition that this kind of distinction is useful and meaningful, I think. So that's actually my basic starting point. And in this paper, I just like support Kant's own view by illustrating more detailed function of these two kinds of judgment in the actual empirical how can I say, maybe the stage of our empirical concept formation. So that's my purpose. So I don't like I'm not hope to say like this is useful for modern scientists or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Time is up. So I would like to close the second session for today. And thank you very much. Yes, Igarashi-san, thank you very much for your talk. And I will give the microphone to the organizers. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much for this very good session. I think we had great discussions and we learned a lot today. So many thanks, Professor Terada, for putting this together. And I will just post here on the chat the schedule of the Virtual Kant Congress. So the next session will be next week, if I'm not mistaken, next Thursday. And it will be curated by the Kant Gesellschaft. So you're all invited and very welcome to join. I think it will be at 5 p.m. CET, so Central European Time. And yes, so please remember that we will keep the Zoom meeting open for informal conversations. So you're very welcome to stay. And many thanks, and hope to see you next week again.
Yeah.